Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Glynn.
Thanks and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. I'm your host, Glynn, and today we are going to be talking about NIL, and we're going to talk about the mindset and mental performance that goes along with it. I'm excited to bring in a doctor in the house. We've got Dr. Kiersten Janjigian, and she is going to be helping us here today. Dr. Janjigian has been able to help so many different people, and she's going to be able to talk to us today about what she's doing in the NIL space and the mental performance space. So we're glad to bring her in, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And today, obviously, we're going to be talking about NIL, but before we do that, I want to talk about your background and how you got into this space, because it's obviously a very, very unique space. I talk with athletes all the time about their mental performance, their mental health in general. So talk to me about what got you interested in this career path.
You know, I grew up playing sports, I think like many of us, and my family was really into sports. So if I wasn't playing, I was watching it and kind of analyzing what people were doing, thinking, saying, how they were behaving. And that kind of fueled me as I got into what kind of career do I want to do? What do I want to study? Brought me to sports psychology, very, very much into psychology in general. And then I applied it to the sport domain early on in undergraduate studies. And then I actually transitioned. I took a pivot in grad school, and I started my career in sport management and sport business operations. So I was really working on the business side of sport, which is a crazy lifestyle, to say the least. And then at some point, I kind of figured out I want to help people again and got back into sports psychology, performance psychology, which kind of led me into getting my certified mental performance consultant certification. We call it CMPC, which is the gold standard of mental performance coaching. And that has now led me to kind of working with clients, working with athletes in both athletics and business arenas. And then I kind of took it even further for myself, and I went and got my PhD in cognitive motor neuroscience, which is a fancy way of explaining or saying the study of the brain and body kind of combined, the mind-body connection, and looked at the biological bases of mental performance. So what is the brain doing during optimal performance? What is the brain doing under stress? How can we optimize it? So all of this together kind of has given me a very evidence-based approach to mental performance and sport psychology application.
Well, and to the evidence base comes from you being an athlete. What sport did you play, and where did you go to college?
So I did not play in college, actually. I did not play at the collegiate level, but I played basketball and soccer growing up.
Okay.
And now I play ice hockey.
Oh, there you go.
As an adult, I learned how to play ice hockey. So
that is cool. I work with a lot of women's ice hockey players, so definitely interested in growing the game of women's ice hockey, which is great. So
cool.
Let's talk a little bit about how the first thing that we connected on was obviously NIL, and kind of how that ties into mental performance, because what I found early on when I started working with athletes, in the NIL space, is they would start to get their first deal or two, and all of a sudden their performance on the field, on the ice, wherever they're playing, would all of a sudden, I felt, start to improve. And I was trying to make the direct correlation that the confidence was growing with the NIL side, and that actually led to better performance in their sport. And do you see that connection in the brain, because you know it so well?
I mean, absolutely. That definitely makes sense. Confidence off the field can impact confidence on the field and vice versa, right? So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and that's great. That's great to hear that those individuals who are getting the deals, it's helping them in their performance. I think sometimes we also have to think about the flip side, right? The athletes that aren't getting the deals and they're seeing their teammates get deals and other athletes and the competition that kind of starts to evolve there, and how they're feeling in their performance or the pressure they then put on themselves when they have to go perform to get a deal potentially. But yeah, I think it's great that you've kind of seen the flip side of the positivity and the boosting confidence that, of course, yeah, getting a deal, people want you, right? Eyes are on you, and it's fueling their performance, which is cool.
Excellent. Well, I guess that's a tip of the hat then to my recruiting efforts. I try to, as I say, I recruit good athletes that are great people. So that's what I'm looking for. And I actually think there's a whole nother thing that I think you probably are well aware of, but the recruiting process is a whole nother mental, I would say, drain on trying to, in your, sophomore, junior, senior year, you're going through a lot of changes. You're thinking about a lot of different things in your career. How about that part of a high school, transition? That has got to be a very big time mentally for you to be able to hopefully probably start working with an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually work with a lot of youth performers, youth athletes, especially in that high school kind of range, because there is so much pressure on them to make it to the next level and how they're gonna do that. There's a lot of decision making to be made. There's a lot of stress, and it's not only sport, right? For them,
Right.
they're dealing with school, they're dealing with relationships, the whole social context. Um, so yeah, mental performance at that stage is becoming even more important, I think, than ever before, especially given NIL. But yeah, that transition between how are they going to navigate the showcases, the tournaments, talking and approaching to college coaches, the conversations, right? All of these things, working with their parents at the same time, and the pressure parents out put on them. So yeah, there's a lot for them to think about. And the mindset they have going into that will absolutely matter.
Yep, that makes sense. As you work with athletes now as a certified mental performance consultant, you started to branch into the NIL space with some of your mental performance opportunities to work with athletes in the NIL space. Talk to me about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I have actually taught in the university system the past 4 years. So I have a lot of kind of interaction with college athletes, college students in general. And NIL has become a really big topic within them. So I hear kind of about how it's affecting them and what that looks like behind
Yeah.
the scenes. So I was thinking, how can I help athletes approach NIL and navigate NIL from the mental performance standpoint, from the mental standpoint? So I created an NIL mental performance and resilience toolkit for athletes, aspiring NIL athletes or current NIL athletes, their parents, their coaches, anyone who supports them really. And it's pretty much a workbook with some supporting videos and other resources, and tools. It gives them a bunch of tools to use in different contexts that they might run into, whether it's conversations about money, conversations with sponsors. I've incorporated some of my sports business
I
background.
was going to say that sports business manager was coming back to help. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So familiarity with marketing and all of that kind of stuff. But it's definitely a toolkit for them. What happens if I'm running into this issue? What should I do? How do I handle this mentally? How do I prepare for a transfer portal? What do I do if all my teammates leave my second season? Like all of these things are very new in the college
Yeah.
landscape. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic because so many are looking for those answers, right? And no one right now at this point has seen a lot of this stuff. We're still very new in the NIL world to some of this. We've still got legislation changing all the time. And so I think that kind of uncertainty, going back to, I want to dive in because I really value mental health and everything we're talking about with mental performance. but just how the brain works. I think maybe if you could, help people understand a little bit more about the context of at your optimal level, like what should we be wanting our brain to do? What can we do to help? So I guess maybe if you want to think about it, like a few tips for people, so they can just be even mentally aware, right? Just even be cognizant of when these things are actually happening. And you could go, oh, you know what? This is probably more than I can handle right now. I should probably ask somebody, or get some help or lean on a friend or realize this is happening and then go do something about it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, to answer that question, we could go a lot of routes here. A couple things, particularly about the brain and performance. We know that, let's just use physical practice as a starting point here. When people engage in a lot of physical practice and they get better and better at their sport, their muscles become more refined, their muscles become more efficient, things tend to feel easier, right? If we see a 10-year-old shooting a 3-point shot versus Stephen Curry shooting a 3-point shot, there's a totally different level of efficiency, smoothness, right? And I bet each of those players would report that it either feels easier or harder, right? They're gonna say it's a little harder, right? The same thing happens to our brain with physical practice. We often, because we don't see the brain, we're not thinking about this, but Stephen Curry's brain is extremely efficient and refined compared to somebody who is less practiced than him, right? And this goes to all sports. But this idea that it's kind of automaticity, when you get to a certain level, the brain becomes automatic, efficient, and everything's working the way you want it to, is an important kind of mechanism to remember when it comes to maybe when you're not performing well or when you're learning something. You might be in a learning stage when you're kind of building the efficiency that your brain needs. So always remember, right, there are going to be hard days. It's not always easy. Yeah. And kind of give yourself grace when you need it. And at the same time, we can bring in all these psychological constructs that tag along to this, right? Your confidence is not always going to be high when you're in your learning stage. Your motivation is not always going to be high. You have to learn how to manage your arousal and energy levels to meet the demands that you're putting yourself in, right? And the stress that you're going into to adapt and become better and become more efficient. So all of this plays into kind of that daily sense of where you are mentally in order to handle what you need to do. And that being said, kind of the next path of your question here is what I recommend to people. Do some self-exploration. Self-awareness is kind of the cornerstone of any of this work, of any kind of performing better or becoming better at self-regulation in the moment under stress. So I think find your baseline of where you feel good in terms of your mental health and your well-being. And that might include, you need to talk to people, right? If you're feeling down, if you're somewhere in the middle, even if you're doing well, talk to someone about where you are in your mental health. But that foundation is then going to help you go succeed on the field, on the court, on the ice, right? So you need that foundation of mental health in order to go out and be mentally tough, go out and push the wall back, go out and do hard things, right? And I think sometimes we forget that. And I think the culture of athletics is a lot of, I need to go push myself every single day, like no rest days. We see this all the time, right? Push the wall back, do hard things, push my focus, push my body, when we need to kind of modify the culture a little bit and bring it back to, do I feel good today in terms of my mental health and well-being? Like, am I good as a human being? And then can I go do my thing in my performance domain?
Yeah. You know what's an interesting thing that I've seen, and maybe you can share some insight into this. It's definitely a trend I want to say over the last year and a half, is when I see an athlete make a mistake. Let's say it's softball, let's say it's basketball, whatever it is. I've seen a lot of teammates, and I think this is coming from their coaches, is you're good, next play, you're good, right? Like that must have been somewhere along the line, because I felt like when I was an athlete, right, people were having tantrums, and then they were throwing stuff in the dugout or whatever, and like I feel like we've made some progress on not allowing athletes to beat themselves up over one play, over one thing. Is that a shift that somehow came along here that I just don't know who came up with it, but it's starting to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have started to see a trend of talking about how to deal with failure and how to be more resilient and overcome setbacks and challenges. So I think, yeah, this shift in mindset and coaches and teammates influencing it a little bit with what they're saying and the language they're using, is a good shift in terms of don't beat yourself up about one mistake. Keep going, right?
Next play, next play. Yep, you're good. You're out here for a reason, it's like that kind of thing. So, cool. So let's talk about how athletes, parents can get in touch with you and some of maybe the top services or packages, I guess, that you offer.
Yeah, so I am available via my website, which is Dr. Kierst, DrKierst.com, and on Instagram at Dr. Kierst. I am also actually on LinkedIn right now. If you go search
Yeah, there you
for
go.
LinkedIn, I have created a kind of mini course for sports psychology applied to business and leadership, particularly. So this kind of transitions out of sports a little bit for the business execs and leaders of the group. So you can kind of go stalk me on all fronts there and reach out. Email or phone works to get in contact with me. And in terms of packages, I work with any level athlete, any age athlete, or performer, we should say, of any kind. And I do single sessions mostly, signups as needed by the client. And I do a free consultation. So happy to discuss with people what works best for them. And then particularly because I work from a psychophysiological perspective, that mind body connection perspective, I do a lot of work with HRV biofeedback and neurofeedback. So I have packages that are kind of tailored for psychophysiological optimization, where we do a lot of breath work, a lot of kind of stress management, arousal regulation tools that I teach with that. And those are kind of long-term packages that people can really, really optimize their nervous system.
Right. Yeah, you talk a little bit about long-term success too. I think that that's where somebody could certainly benefit from that. We talk a lot about things being virtual these days. Can you do your work virtually?
Yes, I can. We've pretty much transitioned everything to be virtual besides the neurofeedback, because when we're training the brain, we have to use electrodes on the head, and
Yep.
that tends to be harder to do virtually. But even the breath training, all of that, there are sensors that I send my clients, and we work via apps and we work via the computer, and it works out really well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, I think this has been a very enlightening conversation, and I'm so glad that you're in this space because I can tell you really know what you're doing. Your credentials speak for themselves, but I think that people hearing today from you about what you do with your work, and I think that it's really important that you also emphasize, maybe again, back to my point about trying to help athletes, that well, let's finish here today with even if nothing's wrong, right? Like it's still important to look after your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we forget some of the best athletes in the world, regardless if their performance is bad, they could be at the top of their game. They are engaging in mental skills training. They're thinking about mental performance to sustain their career as long as possible, to sustain that high level of performance. So don't think that something needs to be wrong in order to talk to someone like me or talk to anybody about your mental health or what's going on. Um, Top of the game, top level athletes do this. And I think it should be normalized.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's why Pliable is here to help. That's one of the reasons I started. My agency is because I know that athletes need to have a team, right? And I'm a valuable member of that team, and then I go and connect them with more people like you, that can be on their team because I know what's out there. I just don't know anything about the brain like you do. So we bring in specialists when you need help with something, and I think that obviously you're going to be a great resource for athletes as we continue on with the NIL space, and there's so much more to know. So
Awesome. Thanks,
cool.
Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Dr. Janjigian, we really appreciate your time and want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I'm Greg Glynn. We're glad you could tune in, and stay pliable, my friend.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast, because that's how we roll.